This week, President Biden signed a massive $1.9 trillion piece of legislation into law. There's money in there to increase vaccinations. It's going to send a new round of stimulus checks and extends unemployment benefits. It also creates a tax credit for families with children, a revolutionary expansion of the social safety net similar to the New Deal. Here's Senator Bernie Sanders on the impact of this bill.
This is the most significant legislation for working people that has been passed in decades. We wrote a bill to address the crises facing working families and the middle class and low-income people.
Toluse, Democrats see this economic stimulus package as so much more than just pandemic relief. What's the big picture goal here that Democrats are trying to accomplish with this new law?
They want to show that they are a party that cares about the middle class, that cares about working families, as you heard Senator Sanders talk about. They realized that President Trump, the former president, was able to win over some voters, some low-income voters, some minority voters by, essentially trying to say that he was the populist, that he was going to use the government to help people, whether it was paying out money to farmers that were hurt by the trade war or signing his name on checks that went out to people during the pandemic. And now Democrats want to be able to take that mantle and say that we are not going to be the party of the 1% or the party of only college-educated voters, but we are going to work to make sure that poor people, that working class Americans, that middle class Americans have a social safety net, and that big government, if that is a term that can still be used, is something that they will completely embrace, because the government can help people in a time of crisis like we're experiencing in this pandemic. So they want to show that the Democratic Party is on board with using the government to help people who are in need, poor people, low-income people, working class and middle class Americans are all looking to get something out of this bill, and the Democrats want to be able to take advantage of that and take credit for that, maybe in a way that was different than what happened during the last recession in 2009, when they did pass a relatively big stimulus package, but people did not necessarily give them the credit for it.
Eamon, Republicans have criticized this bill. They say it's simply too much and the economy doesn't need it, especially with mass distribution of vaccines and things turning around. Is there an economic criticism there? Is it possible to stimulate the economy too much?
It is possible to stimulate the economy too much. And their argument isn't just that it's too much, it's that it's not tailored enough to the right people. They'd like to see it a lot more targeted. They say it's got a lot of left-wing wish list items that the Democrats would have wanted to put in any bill that passed, and they just happen to stuff this one full of those. So there are ideological complaints as well as complaints about the overall size of it. But there is an argument among some economists that you're starting to see now that this thing is so big that what you're going to do is flood the economy with dollars. That's going to create inflation. We haven't seen inflation really take off for years now, but it can be a serious economic problem. And there are some economists who say this thing is so big that it's going to do exactly that. The Biden team is gambling that that's not what's going to happen. And we're going to see a return here to a normalized economy and then maybe blow right past that. You've already got some economists out there on the other side of the argument saying we are teeing ourselves up here for another roaring 20s decade like we saw back in the 20th century, which happened right after a pandemic as well, that because of all this stimulus and all of the pent-up demand for travel and socializing and doing all the things that we all love to do, we're going to see a huge boom as soon as somebody fires the starting gun and says we can get off to the races again.
Susan, how much is at stake for Democrats with this bill? If we're not all with our families on the 4th of July having small barbecues, can the party and the president recover from that? They've set a pretty clear metric for success now.
I think that if the White House and the Democrats do not deliver on the expectation that things are going to look better in the summer and things will be back to some version of normal by the end of the year, they'll pay a big price in next year's midterm elections. The first midterms for parties when they win the White House often involve setbacks, and the Democrats have no margin in either the House or the Senate. If they suffer losses next year in the midterms, they will likely lose control of each chamber. But there's a big payoff if they do deliver, because those setbacks in midterm elections, they're not inevitable. There are times like in 1998 and in 2002 when the party in power actually gains seats. And I think that a roaring 20s, that would be a very happy scenario for Democrats to face as they face elections. Those elections are important because one reason this bill got so big, some Democrats think this is the only train in town, that by using reconciliation, it's the only thing they're going to be able to get through this Congress. That's one reason they loaded up. Bigger Democratic margins in the midterms, they could look at doing more.
Yasmeen, to that end, one of the things inside this bill is the biggest expansion of the Affordable Care Act since it was passed nearly a decade ago. And one thing that struck me this week as I listened to the debate on Capitol Hill is that Republicans didn't talk about that as much, especially as Obamacare had been such a focus of the party for the last 10 years. And I wonder with this legislation if maybe the political war over Obamacare maybe quietly died a slow death this week.
I think it's hard to ever rule it out completely, but I think you did see during the 4 years of the Trump administration this kind of tortured effort over and over to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and all that did was make the law's popularity increase. So I think, they learned the hard way, especially when they lost the House in the 2018 midterms, largely because the Democrats really took advantage of that healthcare message and that they were going to strengthen Obamacare, try to make healthcare more affordable for people. But that's really a losing message. As soon as you are trying to take an entitlement away, people don't like that. And the law's popularity reached record levels the more they tried to wage war against it.
Toluse, the country really likes this bill. Even a majority of Republicans right now say they really like this bill. Yet not a single Republican in the House or Senate voted in favor of it. How do you explain that disconnect?
Well, we live in a very polarized society, and as Susan mentioned, there's a long history of the party in power, the white party that has the White House sort of losing out during the midterms. And in the last two presidencies, during the Trump presidency, during the Obama presidency, we did see the opposition party, that party that was out of power, really resist the new president, and they benefited in the midterms. So it has become sort of a political strategy to resist whatever the new president supports, even if it is popular in the polls, to unify around opposing the new president. That seems to be what the Republicans are doing this time around, essentially saying that we're going to all rally around opposing Joe Biden with the idea that that will bring us back into power in 2 years, and then we can have different ideological fights over what's a good policy or bad policy. But for now, it seems like they're all rallying around just opposing anything that Biden essentially tries to get into law, because it has Biden's support behind it. It seems to be a political strategy. We live in a polarized society where those political strategies have been the norm for the past two presidencies, and now we're just seeing Republicans get behind it once again. They are really trying to unify, saying that if they can brand Joe Biden as a far-left socialist, then maybe some of the gains that they made in the 2020 elections, they'll be able to build on those and win back support in one or both chambers in 2022. That's really what this is all about, because they know that a lot of people are happy that the government is going to be sending them checks, that their child credit is going to be expanded, that they're going to have access to vaccines and all of the other things in this bill, opening schools and whatnot. But if they can try to brand this bill as something that is negative or that does not do enough to help the economy, then they can try to ride that into power in 2 years.